Hey everyone, welcome back to Jurassic World Evolution. Today we're gonna take a look at a Operation Genesis themed park that I've built in challenge mode. This is on normal difficulty, so if anyone checked out, I did try to do basically this on Jurassic difficulty, and I got to a point where I couldn't progress any farther because of the dino score requirements. So on normal, it's much more doable. I also did start with random dig sites, and I got some different dinosaurs to start off with, which was nice. I think I started with Gallimimus and Homalocephalae. But you'll see I've tried to keep it mostly 90-degree angles, and I use the big, wide, fancy path as much as possible. There's a few exceptions where the paths aren't all 90 degrees, but most of them are. And this park has every Operation Genesis dinosaur, and I've also tried to make the skins match the color in Operation Genesis as close as possible. As you can see here, this Allosaurus kind of has the brown and orange color that the Operation Genesis one has, so that's the step pattern, by the way. So anyway, let's kind of zoom on out here. Oh well, let's go over here first. This is the Prehistoric Africa area of the park. So we have Carnivore and Spinosaurus living together, and they basically always fight and come to a draw because their attack and defense are basically the same. So they have their own special ranger unit that comes out and heals them every time they fight. And then across over here is a herd of Ouranosaurus. This is probably the closest I could get to the black and orange JPOG one. I actually really like the default Ouranosaurus. Alright, so that's this area of the park. Alright, let's head back to the entrance. This whole area here is basically the Jurassic area of the park, so you'll start off with Kentrosaurus and Stegosaurus. So I've used the wetland skin, which kind of gives it a bit of the yellow-brown look that the JPOG one has. And then we have, this is the woodland Stegosaurus, which kind of has yellowish plates like the JPOG one. It's about as close as I could get. It's nice to finally have Stegosaurus in a park. I have hardly used this dinosaur, even though it's a favorite of mine, because of how frustrating it can be to keep. You'll see also I have paleo feeders for all of the herbivores. I kind of designed this like a scenario with kind of random challenges where I did want to try to have every herbivore have some level of paleobotany bonus. So some of them have up to 40% and others are just 20%. I also tried to use as many live bait feeders as possible as opposed to the meat dispensers, because there were no meat dispensers in Operation Genesis. Over here is the Dilophosaurus and Allosaurus enclosure. It's a lot easier. I used to, in challenge mode, I put Ceratosaurus in with the Dilophosauruses, but it's a lot easier to just have one large carnivore instead of three roaming around. But I actually think that Allosaurus is fairly close to the JPOG one, minus the stripes. And then I just use the default Dilophosaurus because it's pretty close, if not identical actually. And then over here is our first vehicle attraction. I have a Jurassic tour in the back. I personally, I'm okay with using the gyrosphere just because it doesn't bump up against the dinosaurs and jitter like the tour does, so I kind of prefer it. And here's our Dryosaurus. We have a little herd of them in here. This skin and, let's see, this is the wetland one, are both pretty close to the Operation Genesis, so it's mainly the basic skin, and then I have one of these guys. They are very cute. It's nice to finally have them in the game to kind of round out my Jurassic era enclosures. And as you can see, we have, I think, 6 Camarasaurus. Some of them are the basic default pattern because I didn't have the woodland one unlocked yet. But most of them are the green woodland one, which is somewhat similar to the green skin from JPOG. And then we have 2 Brachiosaurus in here as well. As you can see, it's mostly 90 degrees, but it's hard to keep everything on the exact grid, so like you can tell this is not exactly 90 degrees, but I did my best to keep it looking like Operation Genesis in terms of boxiness. And the gyrosphere tour also includes these 2 Ceratosaurus over here, probably the most improved dinosaur from Operation Genesis. The JPOG Ceratosaurus didn't look so great visually, and this one is one of the most featured dinosaurs in the game. I did give them the meat dispensers, mainly just because some of the dinosaurs seem to glitch, where if you don't have multiple goat feeders, they just stay hungry all the time. Alright, before we move on, this is the facilities area. Nothing too fancy, just a lot of power stations. I was debating putting in Iguanodon as kind of like a hidden Easter egg, because Iguanodon is technically in the Operation Genesis files, but it never made it into the game. We're gonna have to send our ranger out here again. There isn't a black and red Carcharodontosaurus, so this is the closest I think I could get. It'd be great if they add one that's Operation Genesis themed at some point, and then the Spinosaurus looks just like the JPOG one. Okay, so that was the Jurassic era of the park, or area, and then we've already went over the Cretaceous Africa portion. The main middle section is basically Cretaceous North America. So let's start here. As you can see, there's a couple of non-90 degree paths here, but the rest of it's pretty boxy and square looking. This is, I know I've seen more impressive stuff online, but this is my best attempt at making the visitor shelter, or sorry, the innovation center seem pretty looking. Let's just go in chronological order. The first enclosure was over here, and this was 2 Albertosaurus. I have the alpine and the steppe skin patterns, because there really isn't a black and orange one, unfortunately. These are probably the closest that I could get. One thing that I've done that I'll show y'all too is I have tried to limit the use of the concrete just to keep it a little more interesting when storms come around. On this playthrough I actually have had several breakouts, but only one of them resulted in visitor fatalities, and it wasn't even storm related, so it just adds a little more variety to the game to not have everything breakout proof. I have lots of ranger teams on this island. This is one of the biggest parks that I've done so far. Alright, but anyway, next up is, I believe, the Ceratopsid enclosure. This has Torosaurus, Triceratops, and Styracosaurus in it. I didn't really mess with any of the skins here because all the basic ones were fairly close to what you see in JPOG. Let's take a look from the viewing gallery. This one and the one next to it have really good views of the volcano, Mount Sibo, in the background. And you can see our Jurassic enclosure in the background as well. Alright, next was probably the Ankylosaurus and Pachycephalosaurus enclosure. One of our Ankylosauruses just died, unfortunately. But this was the next enclosure that I built, and they're pretty happy together. The Pachycephalosaurus was actually the last JPOG dinosaur that was added. Just the random dig sites gave it to me last. But I know the JPOG Ankylosaurus is like kind of black and red. I don't know if there's even a skin pattern even close to it, so I just used the default one. And the default Pachycephalosaurus is pretty much exactly the same as the JPOG one. Alright, I believe my next enclosure, we're going to skip the Hadrosaur one for now because I think the T-Rex enclosure was next. As you can see it's basically on the opposite side of this whole area as the Albertosaurus enclosure. And of course I've used the wetland T-Rex skin, so it mildly looks like the JPOG green one. It's the closest we have for now anyway. The first one actually died from old age. This park is that old. This is the second T-Rex to be in this enclosure. And as you can see, I have outlined it with concrete on one side. And that goat is finished. So yeah, this is our Rex enclosure, and the other two are fighting. This was completely unintentional, but the T-Rex enclosure just happened to flank the Gallimimus enclosure, which made me kind of happy, just to simulate some Jurassic Park nostalgia. And as you can see, they're fighting again. Sometimes they don't fight for quite a while, and then other times, every time they look at each other, they fight. Alright, so that was our Rex enclosure. T-Rex has probably broken out the most so far. Like I said, I wanted to keep some level of danger in the park, rather than just... I didn't use any Dr. Wu genes, so all of them have their default comfort thresholds, so they do try to break out in storms. And if, even though I have weather stations all over the place, these substations occasionally get taken out, and that means that the power to the fences is gone, which almost guarantees a breakout from one of the dinosaurs. But it's just made it more interesting. On Jurassic difficulty, I'm trying so hard to minimize the stress, whereas in this one I wanted it to... money obviously wasn't a problem after a while. But anyway, let's move on to our Hadrosaur exhibit. This probably has one of my favorite views. If you pan over to the side here, you have a great view of the volcano. This one has the default Cretaceous, the Taiga Edmontosaurus, which is probably the closest I could get to the JPOG one. And it also has the default Parasaurolophus, and the Alranosaurus got its own enclosure by the other end of the park. Unfortunately, the Cretaceous is probably the least exciting of the three, whereas this Edmontosaurus looks more like a watermelon. But it's at least somewhat in the ballpark of Operation Genesis 1, and this Parasaurolophus is very similar to the JPOG one. Let's see if we can catch one in the light so we can see them better. A little bit. I also tried to emphasize giving the dinosaurs more space rather than trying to keep 100% visibility at all times. And I also tried to separate the dinosaur feeders and water with trees to give them some level of privacy, even though that's not a requirement in the game. We're gonna have a storm here, so this could be kind of fun. I can show you all how the park handles storms. It hasn't been too bad so far, but as you can see, we do have 4 raptors, which we haven't gotten to yet. So we'll see how they are the only animals in the park that get the full concrete wall treatment. I wanted to emphasize that they are the most dangerous animals in the park. Thankfully not a tornado. But we have one more enclosure, we'll just take a look. This is the Acrocanthosaurus enclosure, and there she is sleeping through the storm. I was between the wetland acro and the default one as far as what matched Operation Genesis the best, and I ended up going with the wetland one just because it was kind of a tie to me, so I went with the more exciting looking skin. Let's see, she's not happy, so we're going to start hearing some thumps very, very soon. I think she's heading for the fence right now. Maybe. She doesn't seem too upset. I hear some thumps. That's probably the raptors, though. I swear every time I look at the acro, this one's taking a nap half the time. Alright, I heard some more thumps. Let's check on our T-Rex. Okay, she slept through it. How about the raptors? Alright, this one's busy hunting. Alright, well, that was pretty uneventful. Let's see if there's any damage done to any of the fences. No, there's just a little bit of damage to some of the power stations. So, nothing too bad. These two almost never seem to try and break out. Spinosaurus's comfort threshold is pretty high. The one I'd have to worry about is Carcharodontosaurus, and she doesn't seem too keen on ever breaking out either. Alright, so yeah, our last one was the Acrocanthosaurus enclosure, which we just took a look at. And she did not seem too enticed to break out at all. I think part of that has to do with the exhibits being pretty large. Should probably open up the park. Alright, so that was our Cretaceous area, specifically Cretaceous North America for the most part. And the very top of the park is the Flaming Cliffs dig site in JPOG. So we have the Velociraptors, Homalocephalae, and Gallimimus. Okay, I just heard a raptor try to break out. Let's make sure that the fence is doing okay. The raptors will decide to go up against the fence like 10 minutes after the emergency has ended, which is always frustrating. Anyway, the Homalocephalae and the Gallimimus get a Jurassic truck tour, and I went with the Rainforest Homalocephalae, which is fairly close to the JPOG one, except the top of the head was red in JPOG. And their enclosure is mostly sand with a good spattering of foliage. And their drinking source is kind of nice and secluded for them. I have to admit, I was surprised how much better the parks felt with Homalocephalae and Dryosaurus in them. I kind of felt like the game was missing cute little herbivores, and this most recent pack definitely gave us that in abundance, so I was very happy to finally have them in here. And lastly is a fairly open, wide area for the Gallimimus, so they have lots of room to run. I've given them extra protection from the T-Rex, just in case it were to try and break out. The T-Rex actually does seem to be drawn over here very often. I'm sure that's just coincidence, but it is kind of funny to see it walk up to the fence and kind of just roar in frustration. And so you can see their feeders are in the corners over here. Let's have our ranger go heal our combatants again. There is room for a separate enclosure. I just wanted to have one enclosure that had 2 carnivores. I could easily fit Carcharodontosaurus over here if I wanted. I just thought it'd be neat to have one exhibit that had 2 carnivores in it that would occasionally fight. I just didn't think they'd fight this often. And lastly, we have in the other corner, we have the Velociraptors. I've chosen the Tundra and the Alpine skins, which are both fairly white and gray, like the JPOG ones. This one's probably closer, which this is the Alpine one. This is a little closer to the JPOG one, I think. Whereas the Tundra one is more kind of blah looking, I guess. This one's more of like, it has a kind of a pink undertone, which is interesting, and we only have 4 of them, so that helps if the likelihood of them damaging the fence enough to escape is pretty low. Let's check the view from the viewing area. What was nice was there was a monorail peg right here, and it would have kind of obstructed the view, so I just put a rock down and it got rid of the monorail peg, which was kind of nice. And that's it. That is the park. Like I said, we'll just release an iguanodon as a little Easter egg, since there were several dinosaurs that were going to be in JPOG that were cut, but supposedly iguanodon was the closest to being put in the game. So we will release one and put it in with our Hadrosaurs, just to commemorate that fact. But yeah, so anyway, this is, we'll do a kind of a flyover here so you all can see each area from above. I originally was going to do a JPOG scenario playthrough, kind of like how there's scenarios in Zoo Tycoon and Roller Coaster Tycoon, but honestly, like, it took me a very, very long time to do this, and it probably would have gotten boring after a while. However, I will say that this was very fun. It was nice to play on challenge mode, but not have it be Jurassic difficulty. So, if you all are looking for something to do as far as replay value with this game, this is a fairly decent option to consider. Have a themed park. You can even kind of make your own custom scenario rules. So like for me, I wanted to have all JPOG dinosaurs, and I wanted all of the herbivores to have some sort of paleobotany bonus. I also tried to limit the number of meat dispensers and use more live bait feeders. And I also kind of reserved the concrete walls for highly sensitive areas, so that's the velociraptors, and I really didn't want anything to break into the homalocephales and eat them, so I gave them and the Gallimimus some extra protection. But if you look, the outer walls here of my big carnivore enclosures are not even electrified, so that storm that we just had was fairly calm, but we've had our share of breakouts in this playthrough. Alright, let's check on our iguanodon, and that will pretty much wrap up the video. Where'd she go? Here she is. She's plenty happy. Such a great addition to this game. Unfortunately, it kind of puts the other hadrosaurs to shame in some ways. But oh well. Alright, so thank you all so much for watching. I'm curious what y'all thought, and if you all are considering building your own JPOG parks. Let me know which dinosaur you think is the best JPOG crossover dinosaur, or which one made the most improvements. For me, it's probably the Ceratosaurus is the best, most improved dinosaur. I feel like that's fairly easy to award. The most disappointing is unfortunately probably the Carcharodontosaurus, because it went from one of my favorites in JPOG to one of my, probably my least favorite large carnivore. I definitely wouldn't say I hate it by any means, it's just my least favorite large carnivore in this game. I prefer the Acro, Giga, and Indominus, and pretty much all the other ones over this Carcharodontosaurus. And which dinosaur were you most excited to see make it into Jurassic World Evolution from JPOG? So that's about it. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see ya next time.